And welcome to another wonderful live stream. So to kick off this one, I wanted to talk about the question I ended the last one with. So the last question that I asked on my last live stream was about covers, whether or not you like faces on your covers. So I did get a couple of responses from Emily Kirk and Joanne Boothby. And they both agreed with me that we're not fans of faces on covers. And there's a few reasons. So reason number one being that I like to imagine the faces of characters. It creates like a more intimate, real experience in your head if you know and you can picture how these people look on your own. And it's different for everybody, which is cool. Um, the other thing that Emily Kirk brought to my attention too is that when you do a face of a character on a book cover, then you're stuck with that one. And if you have to replace that face, then it's similar to changing out actors in a movie series or a TV show. Similar to Iron Man 1 and 2 when they replaced War Machine. As much as I love Don Cheadle, he's not War Machine to me because, that was from the first Iron Man. That's who we were introduced to, and that's who it should have stayed, honestly. But, money didn't agree with that, apparently. So it does kind of pigeonhole you into, like, one face for that character. And it limits the imagination, like I said. So it kind of takes away that personal experience by just giving you a face. So I've never been a fan of cut faces on covers. That's not new. So I decided when I did my covers, it definitely was not going to have faces. One of the great examples were some of the different color pictures that were used for the Anita Blake series by Laurel Hamilton. She had like different body parts, but not like an actual full face. And that was part of my inspiration for my books. So Blood Lily shows like, a woman's back with red hair. So, everything else is left up to your imagination. The second cover is just like from the lips down, and the third cover is kind of similar too, if anyone's actually seen that one yet. If not, it is posted on the Facebook page somewhere in there. It's also on my website, jennyallenbooks.com. Another wonderful cover by Chris Howard. So that pretty much sums it up for my topic of book covers as far as faces go. If you have a different point of view that you would like to share, definitely leave me a comment and let me know, because I love hearing different perspectives. So my main topic for today I want to talk about is pop culture references in books. So my books are set in the current time period. So I do use a lot of pop culture references to kind of not only like give little humorous sparks here and there, but also to kind of pull people into the time period that it is. So one of the things that I tried to do with my books is that if I'm talking about modern age vampires, they're of course going to poke fun at, how pop culture portrays them in the general media. And that's not a dig at anybody. It's not a dig at Twilight or Underworld or any of these franchises, whether or not I personally like them. I happen to be a pretty big Underworld fan. I love the movies. Not so much on Twilight, but, to each their own, and that's perfectly fine, and I have no problem with that. But I do have a lot of digs at pop culture because that's how they're currently being portrayed. And modern vampires, if they existed, would definitely make fun of things like that if they didn't match, the truth. So just like anything. So that's part of my interaction in the book with the reader is that, their views on how they're portrayed. It also comes into, it's an important fact too, in that they're looking at going public, even from book one. So if they're looking at going public, one of the things they're going to definitely discuss is how the public views them. So it just makes sense to me, and that's why I used it. It's not because I wanted to poke fun at other authors or anything else. It's just because, yeah, I felt that they were relevant to the story and made the story more real. So, so I did use them a lot, and it did affect some things, like when it comes to reviews. So the first book, Blood Lily, had lots of reviews. Almost all of them are 5-star. There are like 1 or 2 4-stars in there. But I did get a 1-star review one time, and I was devastated, absolutely devastated. I'm like, what could they possibly have hated so much that they gave my book 1 out of 5 stars? But there was no written review with it. It was just they picked a star. That's it. And it was on Goodreads. So I couldn't let that go. It's like a new author, we obsess over reviews. It's so bad, so bad. The first time I got a 4-star review, I cried. I literally cried, tears, because it wasn't 5-star like the rest of them. So I was so bothered by this 1-star review with nothing to back it up that I looked to see who wrote the review. So I went to their page, and they were a massive Twilight fan. And then it all made sense. I make fun of Twilight at least 4 or 5 times in each of the books. I do. And it's an easy target. It really is. It's maybe too easy. I don't know. But it was so prevalent in pop culture when I started writing these books that I had to comment on it. I had to. And her theories on vampires and the way she writes her vampires, which I'm not criticizing, again, not criticizing, but it's so far removed from the way that I wrote my vampires that, I mean, between how prevalent it is and how outlandish it would seem to the kind of vampires that I write, I had no choice. I had to. I had to. I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan, but I mean, I did have one person write that they didn't like that I made fun of other people who were better storytellers than me. Well, first of all, the better storyteller part, I mean, that's completely subjective. So, I mean, that's a personal opinion. But they completely missed the point of those references. I mean, absolutely missed the point. It's never about making fun of anybody. I don't try to do that, but I just make comments based on my character's point of view. It's not from my point of view. It's my characters. Yes, I write my characters, but my characters have very strong wills, and trust me when I say my characters will not do anything that they do not want to do. No matter how hard I try to write a story a certain way, if I have a character who's in my head, of course, that doesn't agree with the way that I'm trying to write it, it will not happen. I have tried. Like Rose of Jericho in the beginning. There's one very, very important, poignant, crucial scene towards the beginning of the book. And I wrote it and I was like, oh, damn, I can't do that. No, that's too, I can't do it. So I tried to rewrite it like 5 times. 5 times I tried to rewrite it, and it couldn't go any other way. It had to go that way. It was absolutely crucially necessary for that story to progress the way that it did, for that particular crucial, harsh, heart-rending moment to happen. So I'm at the mercy of my characters. I really am. So the important takeaway here is that when you're seeing pop culture references in a book, you need to really stop and think, is this the author and their voice? Or is this actually relevant to the character? Is this how a character really would feel? And I think you really need to give authors that credit by really considering that question. Because I found it completely unfair to be judged that way about things that were 100% legitimate. Like, I mean, if I was a modern day vampire that was very close to human and didn't have supernatural abilities, would I make fun of movies that said that vampires sparkle in the sun? Absolutely. 150% I would do that. And I have in my books. So it's not a dig at the authors. It's not a dig at the franchises. It's nothing like that. It's just the character's expression of how they don't appreciate the way that they're represented in Hollywood. 100% that's what it is. So, I mean, and like I said, there's even franchises I poke fun at that I like. I like the Underworld movies. They're good fun. I totally enjoy them. They do fall into the trope of a woman putting on a black latex suit and she's suddenly an instant badass. So, I mean, they do kind of use that. And that's used a lot in Hollywood. It's not just vampires. But, I mean, there's the digs at Underworld usually revolve around her not owning a latex suit and not instantly knowing ninja warfare. So, I mean, they're funny comedic moments, and that's the way they're supposed to be taken. It's really supposed to, like, bring you deeper into the world and make it more real for you as a reader than it is for me to express my feelings about other authors and filmmakers. Like, that's not what it's about. So, I mean, if you have any thoughts on this subject, like I said, definitely leave me some comments. I always enjoy a nice lively debate, and if you feel otherwise, if you've read the books and you felt that like those digs were a little too harsh, I mean, just let me know. Like, I love to talk about these things. Like, I genuinely love discussions. So I really want some interaction with the fans, and that's why I started doing these live streams. Because it's one thing to just post things on my page, and I post about updates, and I'll make like a little comment here and there, just keep people updated. But I really like this format because we get to like interact on a much higher level. And we can learn from each other with different points of views and things like that. If you're an aspiring writer, then hopefully I can say some things that, you know, give you pause and make you think and consider about certain things. I will tell you right now that the life of an independently published author is not glamorous. I mean, people hear that you wrote books and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Wow, that's so cool. And it is an accomplishment, don't get me wrong. Writing and completing a book, no matter if it's a 1-star book or a 5-star book, is a huge, massive accomplishment, and anyone should be very proud that they've done that. But it does not mean that I have like lots of money and I go to all these fancy places and no. It's a lot of grunt work. I've spent entire weekends like with promotional material. I once had when I started with Indie Gypsy, the publisher that went out of business, when I started with them, they sent me my first shipment of books. And anyone who knows me in real life knows that I am very obsessive compulsive and very color oriented. Like I really do stress about things being proper. And the cover was slightly off center. And I broke down in tears. I called every number that I had for them and was just devastated that this had happened for my first publishing with this new publisher. So they agreed to send me a new shipment of books after they corrected the cover, but they welcomed me to keep the other copies that had the slightly off-center cover. And I just got my first comment while I'm live streaming. That's really cool. I will get to your question, Joanne. I promise I will. So with these books that I had that were off-center, I decided to use them as promotional material. So I had postcards that I made and that had like the publisher information on the back and how bookstores could like buy books from them at bulk and things like that, and different coupon codes and stuff like that on the back of the postcard. And on the front was my book cover and then like a blurb about the book and one of the reviews. So it was really good promotional material, let me tell you. If anyone needs help like looking things over, let me know. I go through Vistaprint usually because a lot of times they'll have like 30 to 50% off deals every now and then and stuff. And you can actually get some stuff made for pretty inexpensive. But I spent a whole weekend going to privately owned bookstores within like a 50-mile radius, and some of the bigger ones, especially Barnes and Noble. So Barnes and Noble is a little bit unique, I found. Books a Million, if you're not in their system as returnable, which means if your publisher hasn't listed your book as returnable, they buy, say they buy 10 copies and only 2 sell. They can't return the other 8 unless they're marked returnable. Big bookstores will not carry your book, absolutely will not carry your book unless they're marked as returnable, because they don't want to lose their ass if the book doesn't sell. And I understand that 100%. But most publishers, the smaller ones, they can't afford to do that, so they don't. And if you self-publish through Amazon, it's print on demand, so it's also not returnable. So you have very little hope of getting into big bookstores without finding a way to make that happen. Now, there are some publishers like Dorrance that I've been talking to that do kind of like on-demand services, and one of their services is making your book returnable, and then offering like PR support and like some advertisements and stuff for when your book is released, and actively trying to get it in stores. They're not cheap, but the advantage to that over a traditional publisher is that you get profits right away. So you may pay for their services up front, but with a traditional publisher, you won't pay up front, but you will not start getting royalties until they earn their money first. So either way, you're paying them. I mean, so these hybrid publishers are kind of like a new wave thing. And, you know, I am checking into it. It's just with the wedding and COVID, and my amazingly awesome fiance did fracture his ankle in 2 places at the beginning of the summer. So it's been a very harsh financial year. So it's definitely not happening right now. But I took these books and these postcards that I made, and I took them to all these small bookstores that are privately owned. And I did try Books a Million. That's when I learned my lesson about returnable books. And then I went to Barnes and Noble. So Barnes and Noble, who I have a deep, wonderful well of love for in my heart, especially the one here in Lancaster. Well, it's actually east of here, but still. And I'm told, because I am not from Pennsylvania, that I do say that name wrong. I say Lancaster because that's the way it's spelled. But apparently they say something similar to Lancaster or something. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm not from here. So I get teased about it mercilessly all the time. Apparently it's a very big deal here. How do you say this name? So anyways, the manager there at Barnes & Noble invited me to one of their promotional events. So a lot of times they have events for local authors where they'll let you bring your books in, and then they'll help you sell them, basically. You do a book signing and stuff, and they kind of buy how many books from you that you sell, and you still make a profit. And if that goes well, then sometimes they'll agree to buy like 1 or 2 of your books and keep them in the store, which is what happened with me, which was great. I was there with 4 or 5 other authors, and one of them was pretty big. She had probably like a dozen books that had sold, and she had people coming from like mid-state New York and stuff to come see her, which was mind-blowing to me. But the best part of it was that every person that came to see another author also bought my book because it looked and sounded awesome, as it is. So I did really well with that event, and it was great. But I love the fact Barnes & Noble does, in general, support local authors in a much better capacity than some of the other big stores that I have seen. So very cool information, especially if, you know, if you're looking into publishing a book or you're just curious about that side of it, then, you know, it's interesting knowledge to know. So, like I said, it's not a glamorous life all the time. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of putting yourself out there, looking for events that you can attend, putting in FaceTime. The very funny thing that I've learned is that a lot of independent authors especially, but authors in general, we're not generally people, which is why we write books. We write books because then we can express ourselves without having to physically talk to somebody. And but the only way you're going to ever sell your book is if you physically talk to lots and lots of people at events. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And my first book event, oh my goodness, it was so hard for me to talk to people. They're like, "What's your book about?" And I was like, stuff." Like, I didn't know what to say. I had to kind of memorize something that goes along the lines of, like, it's a fast-paced forensic thriller with a lot of sarcastic humor, emotional gut punches, the fun stuff. And that seems to work for me as a good opener. One time I had this girl come by and she was wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm looking for my next book boyfriend." And I just had to. I was like, "Hey, I got your next book boyfriend right over here. Yep, his name's Chance Devereaux and he's Cajun. You can't beat that. You won't find anything better here." She bought the book. So it's a lot of fun. But it did take a while to get used to. It was an adjustment, having, the York Book Expo, which was my first one. They've done it a few times now, and hopefully will continue after this wonderful COVID year is done. But we get hundreds of people that come through, and it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking. So I was going to get to my question at the end here, but first I'll address Miss Joanne's question about, she's asking where Chance and Lily wind up in book 3. So if you have not read book 1 and book 2, you should probably stop now. Actually, let me ask the question first, and then I'll get to the one, because then it's a spoiler. So I don't want people who haven't read the book to miss the question of the day. So the question of the day is, do you appreciate cliffhanger endings? I have heard authors go back and forth about this. I've heard readers go back and forth about this. I'm generally a huge fan of cliffhanger endings because it makes me want more. And that's the whole point, is that, I want to read more. I have also heard from people that they're very frustrated with them, especially when they have to wait another year or 5 for the next book. So I get it's a double-edged sword there. But I just want to know everyone's true feelings on cliffhanger endings. Do you like them? Would you rather not see them? So now that that's done, let's get to the spoiler. So, like I said, if you haven't read book 1 and book 2, both of them, it's important, both of them, then stop now, and I will see you guys probably tomorrow and do another live stream, talk about some more stuff. If you have read both books, congratulations! You get a sneak peek at book number 3. So, at the end of Rose of Jericho, it's somber, Lilith Stad's funeral. It was a very, very, very hard scene for me to write, that funeral, by the way. It was very challenging, and a lot of tears. At the end of that book, I was so depressed because I felt like all my characters died because I missed them, and I knew I had to go, buckle down for nursing school, and I wouldn't have time to write. So there was a lot of melancholy wrapped up in the end of that book. Oh my goodness. So at the end of the book, Lilith and Chance are still trying to kind of find their stride. Everything's very with them. I mean, they have that romance, but at the same time, there's so many traumatic things that have happened to them, especially when Piesano comes involved, the siren. Because, oh God, have you ever hated a woman so much in your life? Because I hated that character with a passion, which is why she was so much fun to write. It was a joy. It was an absolute joy to write a character that there is not a single person on this planet that would ever read that book and like that character. Never. It would not happen. Completely unlikable. So they're still trying to find their footing at the end of book 2. So book 1 immediately leads into book 2. So all this action in the first 2 books happens within a couple weeks, maybe less than a couple weeks, more like a week or so. So book 3 finds you 6 months later. So Lilith is suspended from her position as a crime scene investigator with the police force. You're right, Joanne. She was horrible. She was just awful. Just, it was gut-wrenching awful to write that one character that everyone would hate, but it was so much fun. Um, so, yeah, 6 months later, she's suspended. She's going to mandatory therapy. She hates her therapist. She doesn't talk to her. It's bad. They're trying to find their groove, and she's just, no, I have to be here. Doesn't say I have to talk to you. And then the therapist is like, well, technically you have to, or you're never getting your license back to investigate crime scenes and go back to work. So there's that whole tension, and Lilith is trying to find what her new life looks like. So her life as she knew it is 100% over. Like, her job is taken away. She's suspended. Her father, who is the center of her life, is dead. And more than that, it's more than just being dead. It's like his whole reputation was stained. Everything that she thought about him was just, it was wrenched away from her. So she's like adrift, basically. Her partner, who kept her stabilized and stuff, and was her rock, also dead. His widow talks to her, but it's not the same. Like, in the end, Gloria knows that her husband died because of what happened with Lilith and her family. So on some emotional level, she will always hold her responsible, which is horribly unfair, but it's reality. So the only thing that Lilith still has in her life 6 months later is Chance. So yes, they are still together in book 3. They still will have tension. They still will have tension because you have to remember that Chance spent his life, I think the appropriate term is as a slut puppy. I used to use when I was younger. A different girl every night, like never dated someone for more than a week. He's never been in a relationship ever. I mean, he's fantasized of being in this relationship with Lilith, which is one thing, but it's not reality. So reality is different. So yes, they will still have challenges. You will find out more about Lilith's past, which will help you understand why she is not good at relationships either. There is a little bit of personal revenge that goes into book 3. I will not lie. So one of the characters, which you again will not like, trust me, you won't like him, is based on my fiance from when I was younger, in my 20s. It is based on that. Also won't lie. So you find out more of her history, become a little bit more sympathetic, I think, to how she reacts to certain things, especially like big questions that might arise within book 3. So you do also see Nikki is still there, Nikki DeLuca, which is her new partner. And Nikki is a lot of fun too. I do like writing her character. She's spunky and a little smart-mouthed. I mean, she's similar to Lilith, but she has her own little quirky personality. So she's very much ingrained in this book too. Although it's not really about her. It's not her storyline. Like how book 2 was very much about Cohen and his storyline. So the end of book 2, Cohen hands Lilith like everything his family has on their family as kind of like a gesture of goodwill. So Cohen is in book 3. You will see him again. He's not going away. Does he turn over a new leaf is the question that I see now. But kind of. But Cohen is always Cohen. And there's a scene, I'm not going to try and spoil all of book 3 for you, but there is a scene where, so Cohen wants their help. He wants Lilith and Chance's help with something else, right? So he could pick up the phone and call them. But that's not Cohen. That's just not how he is. That's not how he rolls. So instead, he opts for showing up at Chance's place while they're getting ready. They were waiting for a cab to show up so they could leave. But he gets there first and sends the cab away. So that when they come downstairs thinking their cab is here, he's there with his town car. He's like, oh, well, I have to talk to you anyways, so I'll just give you a ride. So he never does, even if it's the right thing, he never does it the right way, ever. Like, that's just Cohen, and that's just how he is. And I don't see that changing. It doesn't mean he's a bad person, really. It's just how he is. There's still going to be arguments, especially between him and Chance. They do not like each other on a very, very deep level. And in book 3, you will find out more reasons why. Let me tell you. So that's one of the fun little shakeups that I have in book 3 is going a little bit more into depth about why Chance cannot stand Cohen at all. Like, he really cannot stand being around him, hates him, does not want him anywhere near him. And even despite the fact that Cohen actually did help them a lot and saved Lilith's life. Like, when in book 2, when they were being held captive by Cohen's grandfather in that apartment, he was going to kill her. Like, there's no doubt. Cohen saved her life by offering up his own. So he's not a bad guy. I mean, he's not. And I know in book 1 especially, you're never quite sure. And in book 2, you're kind of like, oh, I think he's a good guy, but I'm still not 100% sure. He's a good guy. He just is screwed up, and he never does things the right way. Never. Because if he did, he wouldn't be Cohen. So, like, part of Cohen's inspiration, like, when I was writing this character, like, the person that I had in mind for Cohen, and this doesn't happen with a lot of my characters, but this one in particular, there was a very certain actor in a very certain role that I thought of when I wrote Cohen. And that is Eric Northman from True Blood, played by Alexander Skarsgård. And that was that was my inspiration for Cohen. That's pretty much where he was born from, is that kind of mentality, like, nothing affects me. I am not going to let anyone know that I'm bothered by anything. But deep down I am. So he has a lot of very deep feelings that he never admits to and doesn't own up to quite frequently. So yeah, there's moments when you're going to just want to smack him in the face. But, I mean, it's part of the fun, though. Yes, he did, but he had ulterior motives, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, another part of Cohen is that you don't ever really know what his motives are, but he has them. Absolutely has them, yeah. He does. Part of that is addressed in book 3, though. It really is. Not to give a huge spoiler, semi-spoiler, I think. So you remember, like, in book 1, Chance and Lilith both had some of Cohen's blood. And it was addressed in book 1, and then again, I think in book 2, about how those added benefits occurred. Like, she could suddenly feel emotions and even draw on them. And in book 2, you realize that they did fade away for her. She didn't keep feeling them. She didn't keep, like, having the advantages either. So, you know, that it was a temporary side effect for her. However, not temporary for Chance. Which brings up a whole well of interesting, fun things in book 3. Is that, you know, yes, he can still sense everyone's emotions just the same as day 1. And that's a big part of it, is that he can feel people's emotions, and part of people's emotions are their motives. The other thing too is that, you know, he still has that ability to draw on emotions to heal himself, and possibly even extend his life, because remember, he is a half-blood and destined to probably live about 80 to 90 years, maybe a little bit longer. I mean, if he didn't die in the line of duty. So, I mean, that's a fun twist there that, you know, I can play with, is that, you know, maybe his life isn't going to be as short as anyone thought. So, a lot of fun things in book 3. There really are. Part of the beginning of the book is, like, getting reacquainted with these characters, because 6 months has gone by. I mean, I tried to not make it so slow-paced and overwhelming that people are like, okay, cool, yeah, I get it. Can we just get on with the story now? but I also wanted to give fans that moment to like catch up with the characters. So, so yeah, Lilith's growing as a person in this book. She initially rejects therapy completely, but then she actually starts to do some of the work, um, and gets pulled in on a very unusual case that ties into stuff that you learned in book 1 and book 2. So some of the loose threads that were still kind of out there hanging. Um, she's also like trying to make herself stronger. So she's attending Chance's like karate lessons and stuff. You know, he does teach still in New York City, mostly children, but you know, she's learning. It's cool. She's not a badass, not 100%, but she wants to get there now because her whole view on life has changed. So it's no longer like, this is my life, la la la, you know, I do this, I do that, you know, and every day is the same. Now it's all doom and gloom to her. Like, she's been through 2 extremely traumatic experiences, and she just knows in her gut that it's not done. So she has this kind of manic need to prepare herself. So she's training with Chance, and she's taking shooting lessons from Timothy and things like that. There's no contact discussed with Cohen in the beginning, not until he like shows up. As he is prone to do. Yeah, I know. I need to write faster. I apologize. Book 3 is going to be so much fun, but I do have to finish writing it. And currently I am still on edits for book 1. So, I mean, I am making progress. I'm not just sitting here doing live streams every day. I mean, I do actually write too. I have, I'm probably a little over halfway done with the edits on Blood Lily. So, you know, if I buckle down and get it done, then I can move on to book 2. And one thing in book 2 I learned by some self-reflection for the 50 millionth time. So there's something I have to fix in book 2. So if you've read book 2, continue listening and I will tell you my fix. Because it's simple, but important. So in book 2, when Lilith is at Gloria's house, she's attacked by the corpse of her partner. Except that at the end of book 1, there's a massive explosion that his body is disintegrated in. So I don't know how his body could actually attack her because it's not there. I don't know why this never occurred to me until this final round of like doing edits, but yeah, that's a pretty glaring inconsistency. So it will be changed and it will make much more sense because it will be her father's body instead of Alvarez, which, like I said, it makes sense because the people controlling it had access to Gregor's body because he was at their facility when he died. So they could easily have brought that along as psychological torture for her. And it's something they would definitely do because, you know, by reading that book, they are all about psychological and physical torture. So that will be the big fix for book 2, is that Alvarez's body will not make an appearance in that book. It will be Gregor's body in that scene. So yeah, once I finish that and then the edits on book 2, then I can get back to working on book 3. I'm hoping I can get both of the first 2 books re-edited and done and ready for the books event in September next year. So maybe I can have book 3. I'll probably be shooting for fall of not next year, but the year after. I know nobody really wants to hear that, but I have to be kind of realistic with my timelines. And I do like Halloween time releases because they seem to be better for like suspense, thriller, horror type books. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see when I get there. Like I said, I do have like over half of it written. I just have to kind of reorganize it a little bit because of the shift in perspective from one person to another. Because I want the pacing to feel right. And the whole point of this second perspective is not just to like, give you information without info dumping on you through one spot in the book, but it's also to like keep the pace fast. Because one of the things that I realized when I'm writing like this beginning part of the book and you're catching up with these characters is that it kind of it can be a bit much where you're just kind of like, okay, but what's going on? Like, yes, I see this is where their relationship is. I see where this friendship is. I see where her work is. I see where her therapist is. But what's the driving point of this story? My timeliness is fine. Oh. So I needed those other scenes to really drive like the thrill and get in there. They're the violent ones. Just an FYI. So I needed to sprinkle that in there so that, it's kind of, it keeps you going, at least till the middle of the book when like the true action really hits. So, so once I figure out that pacing and stuff, then, I can finish writing book 3. I do have it mapped out. I do know what's going on with it. I do know where it's going, as long as the characters agree with me, because you know how they are. They don't agree, it doesn't go there. So I am hard at work on those things in the background. So, so don't forget my question of the day. My question of the day is about cliffhangers, and if you appreciate them, or if you would rather not ever see one again. Although I will warn you, book 3 will have one, and that's just, it's either I have a cliffhanger or I only have 3 books and the 3rd book is like 5 million pages long. So I'm kind of leaning towards there's splitting them into 2 books, which is cool though, because I mean I like the name Ghost Orchid, which is my title for book 4. Hi, Chris. Hi from Chris Howard, my awesome cover artist. Always thrilled to work with him. He does great work. So, so definitely think about my question about cliffhangers. I hope you guys have enjoyed this rather lengthy live stream, which I wasn't intending, but hey, it was a lot of fun, so I appreciate it. I love all the interaction. It's great. It's exciting. So hopefully I'll be back tomorrow. If you guys have other questions that you want me to address or talk about tomorrow, drop me a comment. I do have a list of topics, since I wasn't getting a lot of questions at first. So I do have a list of topics I pulled off of like interview sites for authors. So, things for them to prepare for interviews. So I do have some questions that I can bring up, like either questions for you guys or questions about things I'll just talk about. So hopefully you guys had fun. I did. I enjoy it, as I do every time. And hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow, and we'll talk about some more stuff, and that'll be cool. All right, you guys have a great evening, and I see you guys tomorrow.